I have been trying to get out here all morning and it has been blowing a howling gale, but I want to talk to you about different ways that you can grow food in your own backyard. G'day there, I'm Dana from Fantail Valley Homestead, and it has been super windy here with a really warm nor'wester, and now it has died down and it looks like the rain is coming. The sky is incredibly dark, so I just thought I'll feed the toddler some lunch, leave him inside with the big kids while I pop out quickly to show you around some different ways that you can be growing food in your own backyard. Now, I don't mind if you subscribe to the climate warming up, climate change theory, or whether you subscribe to the complete opposite with the grand solar minimum and that the world is actually cooling. I am not getting into that debate here, and if you want to look into those options, feel free to look into them yourself. Either way, the reality is that this year, so far, there have been reports of China having crops failing, America having crops failing, a lot of places in Europe having crops failing, and we are, excuse the wind, we are having extremes of weather, and that we cannot deny. So I think personally that the best thing that you can be doing is learn how to grow some food in your own backyard. Well, too late, the rain started, so I have nipped around and tried to take some photos for you of the different areas that we are growing food in our backyard, and I will try and talk to them while superimposing some videos for you so that you don't get wet outside. Also, don't eat your hair, that's disgusting. So it doesn't actually matter if you have a really small backyard. There are lots of things that you can still grow even if you've only got a patio. Lots of plants, especially vegetables, will grow really well even just in containers. And my very first garden was actually just some grey tote trays that I had sitting outside the garage door when we first got married, and I put carrots, and I think I grew peas and tomatoes, and there were definitely some lettuce and some broccoli in there as well. And all I did was bought grey totes and put some potting mix from the supermarket in there, and then I put the plants in and they grew. I just had to keep them watered. You hear the water landing on the dog dish. I'm just gonna go move it. So I get it, growing a garden can be really intimidating, and it doesn't need to be. A lot of plants will quite happily just grow, especially the annuals that we grow as vegetables. Usually all you need to do is get some of the transplants from the store and stick them in the ground and keep them watered. There is a lot more nuance available and different things you can do to obviously make them grow better, but plants in general will do their very best to grow given the right conditions. So as long as they're getting at least 6 hours of sunlight, and as long as it's above freezing, most plants will keep growing given enough water and enough soil. Obviously you can add to that, sprinkle around some compost, you can go crazy and get raised beds. But honestly, if you are urgently trying to grow food in your backyard and you don't have a vegetable garden established, you can either use pots, you can sneak plants into the edge of your flower garden, or rip out some of the flowers and put some in. And if it's genuinely dire, you can actually pull up your lawn and very quickly turn it into a garden. In fact, probably what I would be more inclined to do would be to lie down a thick layer of newspaper and then put a good 3 to 4 inches or 8 to 10 centimeters of compost on top of that. And if you are having trouble getting hold of compost, you can just use dirt. And if none of this is possible, you can hire a tiller, or even just use a fork and a shovel and just flip over the sod and loosen the soil. If worst comes to worst, plants will still grow in that even. But if you're doing the compost and the cardboard thing, then all you need to do is poke a hole down through the cardboard, give everything a good wet down, poke a hole through the cardboard and plant down into the soil, and the plants will grow and the grass won't. So that is a really quick and easy way of breaking in new soil without having to break your back. Now some plants will give you more calories, better bang for your buck, and better bang for your time, I suppose. If I was to pick 3 survival foods, I think I would plant definitely pumpkin or squash, probably butternut. Pumpkin, they tend to be a little more hardier and they taste nicer. I like them better. Not everybody loves pumpkin, but if you're starving, I would prefer to eat pumpkin than a lot of other things. Another thing I would definitely plant would be beans, and honestly probably bush beans rather than runner beans. I find that bush beans, they kind of grow, they set their fruit, and they're pretty much done. And you don't need a big climbing trellis for them. They will usually just grow a couple of feet high, and then they will make beans, and then they're done. And so you can eat some of those fresh, obviously, and then you can also dry some of the beans as a protein source for later. And I think probably the other thing I would definitely do is potatoes. I love potatoes. They don't love me so much, but I love them. They store really well. You can plant 1 potato and usually get a harvest of between 10 and 20 potatoes. For every 1 that you put in the ground, you should get 10 to 20 back. So I think that's a relatively good return on investment, especially given all you really have to do is stick the potato in the ground, keep the weeds down, and come back and harvest later once the flowers are up. I think if you've got more space, you could we do some other vegetables that we don't really eat, but if we needed to, we could eat. So we grow Jerusalem artichokes, also commonly known as fart chokes by quite a few people because of the content in them. They do sometimes give people gas, but again, if you're genuinely hungry, that's better than being hungry. And marshua, I think, is the other one we're going to put into that category. We're going to grow it as a flower, and it does make a tuber, and we have tasted it, and we're not huge fans, but as a survival food, I definitely think it's worth it. 1 little tuber put out, I didn't even count them, but there'd be 30 to 40 tubers for that 1 tuber that I put in the ground. They weren't fussy plants, they grew really well. So they are some that we are actually going to grow in some spare space as flowers, but actually they're edible. So I think getting a garden in the ground is probably your very best way of making sure that you've got food if you need food. And it's definitely one of the best ways that you can provide food for your family without too many inputs and too many ingoing costs. Other things that you probably want to look at are things for a source of protein. So the 2, maybe 3 things I would recommend there. 1 would be chickens. Probably, I don't know if I'd be inclined to do a dual purpose chicken. My personal opinion is anything that is bred to do 2 things will do neither thing very well. So I think if you are wanting chickens for meat, then get a meat breed. A heritage meat breed will take longer to grow out, but then you're not having to rely on a hatchery to supply you with birds. Dorking and Indian game are both quite good meat birds. Light Sussex is another really good one, especially if you cross between an Indian game or a Dorking with a Light Sussex, you'll get quite a meaty bird. They do grow relatively quickly, but nowhere near as fast as you'll find like a Cornish cross or a cob does. So the main thing I'm thinking, if you've just got a normal backyard sort of space, you're probably more likely to be looking at some laying chickens. And because of that, I would personally be inclined to get the commercial hybrid layers because they lay so well. And they have been designed to lay a lot of eggs for not very much food. You can raise them on largely scraps and free ranging if you desperately need to. I would recommend that if you're not going to be doing grain inputs, that you look into raising something else to feed them as well. Black soldier fly larvae or mealworms is another option. Mealworms are really easy to grow. We actually grow them for my daughter's lizard at the moment, and they are very easy to grow. You can grow them on either barley chaff or baker's bran or like quick cook oats. Anything like that they will happily eat. So chickens in your backyard don't need a huge amount of space. A square meter per chicken will generally be plenty, especially if you're also able to let them out to wander around. You can keep them in hutches in a similar way to what you keep rabbits, and then move them around. A hutch is also known as a tractor these days, so like a chicken tractor, but it doesn't have to be a massive one. You can just have a small one for 4 or 5 chickens. If you're trying to work out how many chickens your family needs, usually what you do is 1 chicken per person plus a spare, and that will usually give you enough eggs for the week, unless you're like my husband, who happens to eat 8 or 9 eggs pretty much every morning, in which case you need a much bigger flock, like what we have. Just send away a snotty 6-year-old, you don't want to see that. Chickens, what was I saying about chickens? Oh, laying chickens. Usually a hybrid chicken will lay an egg almost every day for the first 18 to 24 months, and then after that you would ordinarily replace them. But if for some reason life is a little more chaotic in 2 years' time, they will continue to lay, so don't panic about that. And alternatively, I know a lot of people unfortunately these days aren't allowed to keep chickens in town, and I think that is a ridiculous rule and should be overturned. But unfortunately it currently is the case. So quail is another option. The Coturnix, I don't know how to say that word, it's not English. Those quail, anyway, you can be used for both meat and eggs. Usually about 4 quail eggs is equivalent to 1 chicken egg. Quail are really quiet. You probably need an incubator to be able to help them incubate their eggs. They're not very good at sitting on their eggs and making more baby quails, but that might be an option anyway as an alternative protein source while you're living in the city. And I think the third one would be rabbits. If you have the space, even the backyard, to run a few hutches or rabbit tractors, whatever you want to call them, or a space that you can put up cages and that you can cut and carry fodder or grass or something to them, you can raise rabbits pretty much solely on grass if you needed to. That is largely what they eat out in the wild. If you've still got access, obviously, to pellets and high protein foods, they will grow better, they will grow faster, and they will grow more healthily, but it's not a 100% requirement if you don't have access to it. So meat rabbits are a great option. If you can, you could even set up a colony area in a shed or a space on your back lawn. I've got a whole lot of videos about keeping rabbits that I will link to up here or up here. Yes, that's much better. You've come outside, have you? This little dude turns 2 this week, and he's covered in ramen noodles. Who's that? Kaya and Jada. Hi. Where's your bike? Can you go and find his new bike? It'll be out in the rain. Quick, go get your bike. Quick. Right, quickly get rid of those. I think they are probably the main things that I would look at doing. If you are looking at growing food in your backyard, I would look at definitely starting a garden. And if you want some help with that, I have a blog with a whole lot of gardening resources. I've got playlists of gardening information, and I've even put together a book and a course for you. So if you want to check any of those out, if you're new to gardening, that will definitely get you on your way. And as for protein, I would be looking at chicken eggs and either rabbits or quail. I hope you found that video useful. If you have, hit the like button. Consider subscribing to our channel. We bring you videos twice a week on growing and preserving your own food and other homesteading bits and pieces. And I will see you in the next one. Right, I'm going to go make some soup and make some stew and get out of the rain.